So my name's Seth. I started HEMA when I was just over 12 years old. So I've been doing it for way too long now. Maybe I'm 26 now. It's been a while, 14 years, I guess. And it's just been an absolute blast. I started with Blood and Iron martial arts, and then now I've proceeded to start training with the Victoria crew here, and it's just so much fun.
My name is James. I grew up in the prairies, and when I was probably 11 or 12, I watched a pirate movie on TV, and I was just like, oh, fell in love with tall ships and swashbuckling and whatever. And so I asked my dad to make some wooden swords. So he went and made some wooden swords, and my friend and I, we sat in the basement and hacked at each other until our swords broke and our knuckles bled. And then that Christmas, my mom signed me up into a fencing class. Started fencing probably, well, I've been fencing on and off for 40 years. So it was a huge part of my life. And I was a competitive sport fencer for probably 15, 20 years. Competed on Team Saskatchewan for saber. And retired. At some point I realized that couldn't quite make my goals in fencing, and I needed to eat, and so eating was probably more important than chasing this elusive Olympic dream. And retired from that, and then I had kids, and then the kids wanted to play with foam noodles, and I made swords out of them, and somehow ended up back in fencing again. And at this point I discovered HEMA, which wasn't around when I was fencing, and really found that HEMA was kind of why everyone wants to play with swords, going back to the source.
HEMA, again, it's historical European martial arts. So a lot of people might know things like kendo, and it's the European equivalent to that, where it's practicing how to use swords and other medieval weapons. But I think for different people, it's different things. There is the sport competitive side of things and all that. But it is a martial art. You are learning, in a sense, if for some reason there was a zombie apocalypse or whatever, I think I'm quite prepared. Because the techniques you are learning are very much real and were used. We have manuscripts that we follow and learn and train off of, and we practice with sharp swords, and yeah. I started martial arts when I was 6. I started with Taekwondo. And then from there, we had a guest instructor come in and teach us something called chanbara, which is very similar to kendo, but with foam swords. And then after that, I did do a little bit of kendo, and I thought, wow, sword fighting is really cool. And my parents were walking around downtown New Westminster and ran into Blood and Iron when it was first opening. And so I got in kind of at the ground floor there, and then started training with them, just because everyone thinks swords are cool, right? So I came to Victoria for school. I went to the University of Victoria for astrophysics, and I did take a bit of a break during my studies from sword fighting and all that. But Blood and Iron somewhat disintegrated due to some unfortunate leadership. And so from there I was just looking at, oh, well, who else still does this? Where can I get back into it? And then I found the group with Thomas, James, and all the others, and it was just an absolute blast. Fundamentally, swords are cool. But on top of that, it's really good cardio. Any kind of combat sport where you're against another person and you're pushing yourself to beat them, you do have to exert yourself quite a bit. So the fitness aspect is awesome. And a little bit of mobility and more functional fitness too. So like I go to the gym, I lift weights and all that. But to be fully honest, sometimes it's kind of boring just to go to the gym. Whereas like, it's not that boring to hit someone with a sword. So it's just a way to get out, make some friends, and get some exercise in on top of it just being really cool. The biggest thing for me is everyone grows up around the Christmas tree, if you have siblings or whatever, and you get the wrapping paper rolls and you hit someone with the wrapping paper roll. And that brings so much joy when you're a child around Christmas time. This is just adult that. And the wrapping paper rolls don't break on the first hit. You can keep using them, which is fantastic.
I think for me, and everyone might be different in terms of what they're drawn to. I think because of my sport fencing background, I love the sparring. I love to play. And that's what I'm interested in. I love the exchanges, the feeling of, when you're clanging steel and the sparks are flying and then you're just like, stuff is happening. Is those little moments I live for, I think are cool. So it's not necessarily I'm after the hit or whatever, but I like those moments of creativity, of expression, of the exchange when there's stuff happening at a really fast speed. That's what I like. I think as equipment has become better and prices have come down a bit, it's becoming more accessible. But in the same token, I think that is probably the biggest barrier for clubs and people getting to HEMA is the equipment. Still tends to be quite pricey. Especially, if you're having a club like our club, volunteer run, we don't have money for loaner equipment and stuff like that. So it's always kind of a challenge.
So my first kit, I went to Value Village and found some hockey shin pads and found some lacrosse elbows and some hockey gloves, and the helmet you do have to, that's a bit more specialized, but just a regular hockey cup. And then you can get a neck protector with the helmet and you're pretty much set. So it is, the entry level can be quite cheap if you don't care if your equipment's secondhand and not actually specific to the sport. It'll be good enough for what you're starting with. The gloves are the main one. So at the beginning, you'll probably start off with like a very rigid clamshell, kind of like lobster claw glove, which inhibits your mobility a lot. It makes it hard to swing, but your hand's really safe. And once you start getting better and you don't get hit in the hands as much, you can start transitioning to things like fingered gauntlets, where you can move each individual finger, it's unarticulated, and they're still protected, but it's not as protected as the clamshell. So you're sacrificing a little bit of protection for mobility, and a lot of your kit comes down to that is, I want to be protected, but I want to be able to move, so what level of pain am I willing to accept as a fighter?
So for me as a sport fencer, when I found out about HEMA, it was like, oh wow, and kind of wondering, well, where's the overlap, and do I have any advantage given, that I've spent, 30, 40 years doing that? And it's a tough one to answer. I would say yes and no. And for me, there is some overlap, and I think the big thing where my training as an Olympic fencer comes into play is distance and timing. I think that is fairly universal, and I can ride on that. Where I really struggle is with the two-handed weapons, so the longsword. So I just don't have the neural pathways, or where I'm using my offhand. So if I'm using a sword and buckler, if I have a buckler in that hand, or if I'm doing rapier and dagger. So trying to synchronize the two, it's just not there. And same thing, the body movements and the mechanics are very different. So in some ways it's challenging, so I'm finding that I have to override and rewrite 40 years of neural pathways. And then in some instances, I can ride on that experience. So it's a catch-22. So some things yes and some things no. It seems like there's two separate worlds, and in the HEMA community they call it MOF, Modern Olympic Fencing. And I would say originally there's a bit of kind of disdain, and it's they're just playing tag with antennas and stuff like that. I'm kind of at the point now where I've kind of have my feet in both worlds. For me, sword fighting is sword fighting. And to a certain degree, if you understand modern Olympic fencing, it has its roots in historical European swordplay. And it's just taken on its own life and has become a sport, and there's been changes. And it has evolved over time. And I think some people looking into that would be critical of that evolution. But I think if you look at the HEMA right now, in 20, 30 years from now, it'll be very different, and it's already evolving and changing like modern Olympic fencing has. Well, I think first of all, one of the complaints, HEMA people have of modern Olympic fencing is it's linear. Yeah, modern sport fencing is linear, up and down. You go forwards and backwards. And then, yeah, in modern Olympic fencing, you have the electronic scoring stuff. So you have a fairly unbiased system of whether or not you struck someone. Difference, I think, in HEMA, you're relying on judges to look at hits and whether or not your opponent will call a hit. So modern Olympic fencing has evolved, so with the thrusting weapons, so you have foil, and the system is designed with 500 grams of pressure to depress the point. So when you hit someone, you need 500 grams of pressure in order to activate the light on a valid target area. In épée, it's 800 grams. HEMA, you're looking at it from the parameters of, would this actually cut? So I think the intent and the focus in HEMA is very much more on the martial aspects of it. So when you executed a technique, would it have the desired consequences? Debilitating your opponent, actually cutting flesh, cutting through garments and stuff like that, would it be effective? So you're looking at things like edge alignment. So are you slapping them with the side of the blade as opposed to actually cutting them? So it's kind of interesting for me because I've been around and I've seen modern Olympic fencing change a lot in my lifetime. When I started, there was no electrical scoring system for saber. Now they've developed it. So when I first started, we had corner judges. We had two judges behind us, and one president oversaw everything, and then the other guy. And so you're watching. And one of the things I liked about saber, there's always a bit of acting, right? So you go up and you do an exchange, and you act like, yeah, I hit the guy, and you miss, but you make the sound effect and you act like it, that you hit, and they're like, oh, yes, yes, yes. So there's a bit of frustration, I think, for some people in the HEMA world because they're dealing with the human aspect. Did they see it? Did they think it was a quality hit? So that's always, I think, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in the HEMA world. I have a lot of baggage from my fencing days, where I was hardcore competitive. I was on the provincial team and I was doing national circuit stuff and traveling to the States doing UA circuit. So after that, I was kind of burnt out, and I would say I hate competing. But I have been slowly doing HEMA stuff. And it's a weird journey for me, trying to unpack my baggage from the fencing and trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing and what do I want to do with this? So my focus now is really, I just want to play. And so I view tournaments as an opportunity to kind of cross swords with other people that I wouldn't normally see. And it was interesting, so I went down to Phoenix, Arizona this year for a big tournament. Prior to that, I had been to two events, one on the island, which was quite small, and then one on the lower mainland, which was more kind of casual. So that was kind of my first taste of a real kind of tournament setting. My takeaway from going down to Phoenix was what's really interesting is the community, is that I think that's what a lot of people like about it is you have people that are very passionate about something and they love to geek out about it, and it's a really nice community. So even though people might be competitive in the moment, it's very embracing and very community oriented. So that's kind of my pull now is the social and the connection to other people, and then it's an opportunity to grow and learn stuff and kind of push my technique and my training. So yeah. So I'll be doing tournaments, but not necessarily to compete. in a way that, I'm used to.
I think it's just a great way to get together with historians, Dungeons and Dragons players, athletic people, and just kind of a more niche group of people that are hyper fixated and like that. You get the Renaissance reenactment people and all that. And it's a unique group that you can get together with to explore what I think is a phenomenal hobby. And the breadth of weapons that you can choose from just makes it so much fun. There's really something for everyone. If you want to learn longsword that day, that's great. If you want to learn saber that day, that's great. If you want to do dagger, that's fantastic. If you want to do messer, awesome. If you want to do side sword, sword and buckler, we're learning rotellas right now, which is awesome. And they're so much fun to work with, and everyone's there to improve everyone. And even if you're not able to compete as much as you'd like, such as myself, then the group is still accepting of that.
About a year and a half ago in the spring, I've been playing pretty hard. So I do Olympic sport fencing 2 nights a week, and I was doing the HEMA training with the HEMA guys 2 nights a week. There's this UVic student that came out and wanted to fence saber, and I got excited because there's not too many saber fencers in our fencing club. And so I asked this young gal how long she'd been fencing for and where she trained. And then she tells me she trained in Russia. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, I'm in trouble. And sure enough, I hadn't fought like that since I was like in my 20s. This kid just ran me off and I was just like dying. So at that time, I just noticed that my energy was going down. So even though I was super active, I was getting gassed really easy and I'm just dying and couldn't figure out what's going on, and times I thought I was having a heart attack going to emerge, and don't know. Anyways, long story short, get some follow-up testing, and sure enough, I've got 4 clogged arteries, and so talking to the cardiologist, and so how do you feel about open heart surgery? And I was like, oh, he says you'll live longer. So I was like, okay, sign me up. So yeah, I had open heart surgery a year ago this time. So I'm quite happy because they take material either from your leg or from your arm. So they took it out of my arm, so I got this awesome scar. So whenever I go out, I always tell people, yeah, I got into a knife fight with a surgeon and I lost, and then I got an awesome scar on my chest. So the recovery was really hard because I just wanted to play. I wanted to sword fight. That's the only thing I wanted to do was just to do HEMA and play with swords. And so every time I would go out just to visit the guys at the HEMA club, I brought someone with me who wanted to try it. And so they were doing it. And I was, letting them be coached and trained. And then I walked over at a break to show this guy something, and they were yelling at me, and Thomas actually came over and hit me with a sword because they didn't want me touching any swords because I was, still in recovery. And so they're kind of like my second family, looking after me, make sure I don't push it too much. So 3 or 4 months I was back at it. The biggest challenge for me, initially they cut your sternum and they stitch it up with wire. And so I had to wait for the bones to heal. And actually, because of the wire, it's all reinforced and probably stronger than ever. But it's probably been a solid year in terms of my kind of energy and whatever. I still find it quite hard because I'm on medication to keep my heart rate low. So when I'm exerting myself, my heart rate won't increase to pump the blood, so I get fatigued and I'm always kind of just sweating and stuff like that. But I'm back playing, so I'm happy. It was my whole motivation to get active, to get healthy again. That's what I was looking forward to. That's what I was kind of pushing through to get to that point. That was the reward for all the kind of the pain and suffering. It was to play with swords again. So yeah, it's my main kind of relief, and it's what brings me joy. So yeah, happy that I'm alive, and that I'm still able to play with swords and keep fighting. So it's a good thing.